Welcome to the Women Tech Council Student Innovator Mentorship Podcast Series. I'm Sarah Jones.
And I'm Sydney Tetro, and we are co-hosts of this show.
This show provides conversations with women mentors who came through STEM pathways and launched successful STEM careers. Hello, everybody. So excited to be with you today. And today we have Jamie Morningstar. Very excited to hear her story and have her tell more about what she's done. And besides having like one of the coolest last names I've ever heard, she does really, really cool things with her career. So Jamie, welcome to the show. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself, what your educational pathway is and kind of what you're doing these days with your career.
Sure thing. Thanks so much. It's fun to be here. My name is Jamie, and I'm a software product manager at Qualtrics. I started off my career, my undergrad degree is in computer science. Fun fact, I actually have my Bachelor of Arts in computer science. I went to a liberal arts school and studied computer science, so I got that nice wide base with that technical deep dive. And so I've really based my whole career on software engineering and computer science. In the beginning, I worked as an individual contributor engineer, kind of worked my way up through the engineering ranks, and then moved into product management after my MBA.
So now, you went to school where?
Maryland.
Maryland. Okay. So, and I feel like we're probably about the same generation, and the women, number of women going into computer science back then was on the decline. How did you get encouraged to go into computer science?
It's a great question. So I was totally spoiled going to a liberal arts school. Mm-hmm. There was definitely not the same stigma about careers and degrees in hard sciences. The school was probably 60% women, and my graduating class in computer science was an equal 50-50, which was really, really cool. So going through my undergrad, I was really blessed to not experience some of that loneliness that then I started to experience as I got out of school. But choosing computer science, that was actually my dad's advice. So my parents are super, super supportive, and my dad loves to read, and he's a great researcher. He's a librarian. And so he knew where, the industry was clearly going in the mid to late 90s when I graduated from high school. And he gave me the advice that, I should do what I want and I should follow my dreams and my passions. But computer science would be a great choice. And so just to try it out. So I had never done any programming in high school. It just kind of wasn't available.
Yeah.
And so my first experience was like Comp Sci 101. And I went in and I really loved it. I gave it a try. I loved the problem solving. I loved that everything was just new and different, and it was nothing I had ever experienced before. And it was just kind of like all brain teasers all day, which was really fun. And so I ended up just loving computer science and pursuing it for my degree and my career.
That's so great. So great to have a mentor like that just, is there to completely champion you and just,
Yeah.
There's no reason why you shouldn't be successful in this area. Go
totally. And my
it.
dad knew I loved math. Mm-hmm. He knew that I wanted a really well-rounded education. I chose a liberal arts school because I wanted that wide base in college, but that I also excelled at math and sciences, and that, he knew me well enough to know that was going to be a great fit and I was really going to excel there. And he just encouraged me to try it out.
That's awesome. So let's fast forward a little bit. Obviously, you're, I consider us still young, but you've accomplished a lot in your career. And what would you say is one of your most memorable career highlights that you'd like to share?
Ooh, I think that the highlights are really the times that you're able to build a team, build a product, build a community, and then sort of the mechanism by which you're doing that is technology. And so probably one of my highlights was my first product management job. It was when I moved from being a tech lead and an engineering manager into product management. So again, it was all new, all fresh, all really exciting. And I had the opportunity to lead a smaller site on Ancestry.com that was all a community site. So it was all user-submitted content. It had this very strong community vibe within the site because it was just people helping people. And then to be a part of, again, this small team that was supporting this amazing community was just really, really fulfilling for me because I was using technology to unlock people connecting to people. And that was just a really special thing. And then also when you're a part of those small, really passionate teams, that's always incredibly fun because it's like you against the world, right?
Yeah.
And so it was just, there were a couple of engineers, me, a couple of content people, and we were going to, make the world a better place through our little website. And it was a really fulfilling, amazing time.
Well, and I love too, if I recall, that was way before Facebook. That was way before. I mean, right when social communities where people were just starting to play with the ideas. As a patent attorney, I got to write some of the patents around and this was way before Facebook,
totally.
Right? And people think Facebook was the first social, and it wasn't, right? And
no.
What was that like to be testing new technology like that?
Yeah, it was really cool. I think one of the things that was really fulfilling and interesting was that I didn't have like a strong love or passion for genealogy. Don't tell my bosses at the time. And so it wasn't that subject matter that was exciting to me. It was the fact that people were connecting over that subject matter, right? Yeah. It was the insights they were deriving, the relationships that they were forming because of that subject matter. And so it was a really cool, interesting thing to me that I was like, oh my goodness, it's even less about the specific thing that people are connecting about. It's like Facebook, right? It's not about a specific thing or a specific group or a specific page that people are connecting on. It's those human connections that are made possible by technology and by the subject matter.
Yeah, and we didn't know back then how willing people would be to adopt these technologies. No. And it's amazing to see just the concept of virality.
Yeah, and then the technical issues that come with it, which are just really fun, interesting problems. You get scale problems, you get language problems, you get privacy and sharing concerns.
Sure.
And I guess one way to look at them as problems, but another way is like, how do we wrap and encapsulate this community so that every person is feeling safe and heard, and is able to share and help each other, while still maintaining the controls that they need to be able to maintain for their own safety. And so it's this really cool balancing act that I definitely experienced, in the early 2000s, and that is maintained certainly through all of the privacy concerns of today.
It was a fun experimental time, and you'd see certain sites go down because they couldn't figure that out, right?
Yeah.
People started feeling attacked.
Or it was unsafe,
Unsafe, and it was a really interesting learning time,
I
think, for communities, social communities.
The technical components of scale as well. So you'd see sites going down because they couldn't protect privacy appropriately or maintain a perceived, feeling of safety. And then also just the scale of all of a sudden you get flooded and your traffic triples. And this was before AWS, right? This was before you could just spin up another server in the cloud. So like, what are you going to do? How are you going to maintain a really small footprint and enable as many people as possible to participate with the hardware you had? Because it was going to be months before you could get more in.
Gosh, super interesting. I'm always so sad that these podcasts can't be longer. So this could be technical or more personal in nature, but let's talk about maybe career challenges. Like, what do you feel like you've learned the most from in terms of these experiences that you've had?
Yeah. Again, just kind of drives back to relationships. I think the areas that I've learned the most are in the toughest relationships, where you have a boss that you're really clashing with, you have a teammate who's really challenging, and I think those are the areas where they're either breakers, right? And sometimes they are, or they're these spaces where, holy cow, you're learning the most about yourself and how to relate to people and how to help people be their best as you're learning to be your best in a tough circumstance. And so I think the toughest challenges that I've faced aren't technical, because those are the ones we're primed to face, right? Now, there's still real challenges. They're still tough. But the toughest challenges have been in, teams that I'm leading that just aren't getting along, and how are we gonna succeed together? Because don't bet on the individual, right? Bet on the team every time. Yeah. And so how are we gonna succeed together? When there are, when there's leadership who doesn't believe in what your team knows to be really, really important, and how do you demonstrate that value? And that's when you get to buckle down, work real hard, and lean back on all the stuff that wasn't in your core computer science or STEM curriculum, to make sure that your message is heard, that your team's, norming, performing. I think those are the times that I've learned the most, and the times that I'm most proud of.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really good insight, because I think, we want to focus so much on keeping women in STEM degrees, but there's so much that you don't learn during that process, and it's all learned after, right? So there's this common challenge. I've known quite a few software developers in my time, and they sometimes get at this crossroads. Do I stay in the technical side, or do I transition into leadership? And what are those recommendations that you've learned over time on how do you navigate that? How do you make that decision?
So I think that either way that you're leaning, whether you're leaning towards staying on the individual contributor, maybe moving towards an architecture route. Again, I think, I'm talking about computer science, but this is true all over STEM. So whether you're leaning towards, going really deep into kind of an architecture route or into people leadership, either way, you're leaning hard into your undergrad, into your STEM underpinnings for whatever you're doing, because whether you're leading people, as a leader, we can only lead effectively if we can empathize with those who we lead. And so how better if you've actually lived their lives, right? If you've actually walked in their shoes as an individual contributor engineer. In product management, I can't really, it's almost unfathomable for me to think about succeeding in product management without being able to lean back and see, I went through this as an engineer. These are, my coworkers now are solving different problems. They're doing it in different areas, and it's a decade later. But I've sat where they've sat, and I've experienced the problems that they're experiencing, and I can empathize and help them way better than I ever could imagine doing if I didn't have that background. So I think either way, whether you're going really deep into a more scientific role or leading others who are doing that, you're still leaning way hard into that STEM background.
That's great. Yeah, and I sometimes think it's actually good to maybe, if you have the opportunity, to do both, right? Because then you continue to build that empathy. You might not be a people manager forever, but you've had a chance to be a team leader or have a little bit of that experience, so then you can empathize better with your manager. Or with,
I totally agree.
And so maybe there's some value in getting experience in both areas.
Absolutely. So I think that's a wonderful thing about technical leadership, is that it's very uncommon, at least in the companies that I've worked in, that a technical leader is not still deeply involved in the technology that she's leading. And so going into or embracing people leadership in no way means leaving that technical leadership behind. It's embracing actually like a bigger footprint, because you're keeping all of that technical background and technical leadership, and then embracing also what does it mean to motivate and build teams. Yeah. So it's a bigger footprint. You're not leaving anything behind for good
Totally.
And for ill.
Totally, but I think you're opening yourself up to this responsibility to learn what it means
totally
to lead people, and not everybody's prepared to do that or willing to put in that. I mean, that's hard work.
But I think we're always leading, right?
Sure.
Like, it doesn't matter if that's what our title is or not. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Again, like you said, even if it's only for a window of time, it's a wonderful opportunity for that to be your title and something that you are actively practicing and studying, people leadership. But we're all leading. I mean, whether you become a technical advocate, whether you're going really deep as as an architect or as a member of the scientific community, or whether you're going into the CTO or other C-suite route, there's people leadership in everything that you're doing, right? You're teaching, you're building teams, you're motivating, and you're trying to share why one route, learn and share why one route is better than another.
Exactly. Great point. I think influence can be felt from any role. And I think we're getting away from, hopefully, in this day and age, the manager having power just by a title.
Totally.
Right? And I think it's the most successful teams really empower everybody.
Absolutely.
In the entire team. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. I happen to know that you're a mom, and I happen to know that you also are, juggling personal life and all of the other things that come along with that. So what are your tips and tricks for integrating and not looking for a right answer, but what works for you, Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a mom of 4. So I have 4 between 8 and 16. So our lives are really busy and super noisy and incredibly messy. And in the literal and non-literal terms.
Yes.
And so my advice, as I've grown older, I've definitely come to realize that it's all about the mosaic that we're building, with the tiles of our time. And so I think if I had looked back on my time, say 10 years ago, I would have thought that the right way to invest my time was in really clumpy ways. This is work time. This is sleep time. This is home time. This is cooking time. And my life has gotten, over the last few years, just much more integrated. And that can either be really scary to people because they can feel like they're losing those separate identities, or it can be really, really exciting. It's really exciting to me because I feel like those aren't separate identities, right? Working Jamie is not a separate identity from mom Jamie. These are an integrated part of who I am, and I get to enjoy and embrace all of those. And if I'm doing half an hour on one and then half an hour on the other, that's not a bad thing, and that's not necessarily an indicator of poor prioritization. That can be an indicator of my life being a really integrated whole. So I remember I was reading this wonderful book on time management, and it was on a day where I hadn't been home in like 36 hours. It was just crazy, and I was flying all over, and it was definitely not how I choose to spend most of my days. Right. I'm not a great flyer. I'm a really good sleeper. I'm not a great flyer. And so I remember reading this book and thinking like, oh my gosh, my life is totally out of whack. Like I haven't seen my kids in 36 hours. It's just crazy. And then I stepped back and I said, but as soon as I land, I'm taking a couple of calls, and then I'm spending the rest of the day volunteering at a bike ride with my girls as we're signing people up, and it's this thing that we really love, that we love to do together, that my 8 and 10-year-old were doing with me, and we're volunteering to help facilitate this bike ride. And I realized, oh my goodness, if I back off from how the tiles are arranged on a given day, which can be completely out of whack, and I step back and I look at a week or I look at 2 weeks, I love the picture that I'm seeing, because I do have these times where I'm volunteering with my girls, and I have these times when I'm on a plane to go work with teams on the other side of the country, and I love that too. And if I back off and look at it with bigger eyes, and I look at how's that balance, not on over a day or 2 days, but how's that balance over a week or weeks, suddenly I really like the picture that's painting.
I love that visual. It is just so, I feel very empowered when you describe it to me that way. I've faced those similar challenges, and I just feel like if we could talk about that more.
Yeah.
And luckily our millennials are really demanding that lifestyle anyway, which I feel grateful for. I feel like us early moms were fighting for that from the very beginning.
Definitely.
And so you're welcome, millennials.
Yeah. And I'm grateful for it.
Yes.
And I think we're starting to also step back from some of the mistakes that we made as some of those earlier generations with really glorifying that busyness. Or glorifying and really recognizing that I get to enjoy all aspects of my life, and I get to say no when one's just getting too far out of whack. And again, that it may be out of whack for a week, and that's okay. But when things are getting out of whack, I need to be able to say no. I love a quote from one of these books, and it was like, we're afraid to even admit that we're sleeping, because that would be admitting that the world can spin without us for 8 hours. And it's such a backward thing. We glorify this busyness. How are you? Oh, busy. Yeah. And to just step back from that, to stop glorifying these illusions of busyness, and instead instead of how are you and talking about busyness, saying how are you and talking about a project that we're working on that we're really excited about, or a really cool thing, a really cool meeting, or a customer conversation we just got to be a part of, because it's really easy to fall back on kind of that busy banter. That's so socially expected.
And on the other hand, I think you can immediately engage people so much better around passion.
Yeah.
And they don't even care. I mean, who cares about that stuff, right?
No.
But I can totally tell that you're passionate about what you do and the contributions you're making, and let's shift the conversations. Anyway, it's far more interesting.
Yeah. Rather than talking about how many hours I'm spending on something, which who cares about that?
Exactly.
Let's talk about the things that we're doing that I'm really excited about, or a challenge that I'm facing, right? So if we could answer that question, how are you doing, instead of with busy, by saying, I'm working on a really hard problem with this client and I'm not sure how to solve it.
Yeah.
It's that's actually like, that's what fuels us in our careers. That's what fuels our career growth, not where we're spending hours.
So what advice would you have? I mean, we get this question a lot from our women college students that are wondering, how do I find that company that will let me integrate my work and life, but also allow me to build a really interesting career? So do you have things that have worked or questions that you might ask during the interview process that where you can kind of get to, hey, this company is going to be great for me?
Yeah, I think that actually taking less of a consumer mentality during the interview cycle. So I have found that the most flexible companies are, and the ones that are really like helping my career work for me and my career work for the company, right? Those are the ones that it's less about, do you have a work from home policy? Do you have it's less about the policies, and it's much more about finding a place that's engaged in you and that you're going to be engaged in. Because you're unless it's sort of like a villainous company, which I would hope you would kind of figure out during the interview cycle, by asking great, honest, open questions, that's going to work, right? When we're engaged in a company, like the protection of policies, moving policies forward is really, really important. Maternity care is really important. Flexible work days are really important. When it comes down to it, you're going to be successful in merging the aspects of your identity and personality when you're engaged in a business that you love and in a place that you love to be, because then you're working for that company and that company is working for you. And that's really the relationship that we should be seeking with our companies, not a company where we get to go home because we're protected by some policy.
Yeah. It's a great way to look at it. And I think that it also I sometimes give this advice to women. I say, be selfish.
Yeah.
And it's okay, right?
Yep.
You got to find the place that works the best for you. And it's okay if a place doesn't. You made a choice for your own benefit, and that's totally acceptable.
Yeah. And another thing, I mean, like any choice that we're making during the day, like we're always saying no to something, right? And I think it's really easy for us to implicitly say no to home or to going out and doing yoga after work or something like that by taking on that extra project. And that may be a great choice, but let's make that choice with open eyes, right? And identify, what am I saying yes to and what am I saying no to? Because I find when I do that, then sometimes I realize, you know what, actually, I don't really care if I'm not the one presenting that that cool presentation, because I'm saying no to something else that I really care about. And so I love stepping back and saying, what am I saying yes to and what am I saying no to? Because then I'm making a really wise decision, right?
Yeah.
I may be saying yes to an opportunity at work that I am just really engaged in, and I mindfully know that means I'm saying no to movie night with my family a couple of nights this week because I'm excited about that opportunity.
Yeah, but it's the trade-off that you're very aware of.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it helps the conversation on both sides, right? Because your family knows why, and they know that it's because you're really passionate about work, and that is perfectly fine for your kids to see, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah,
and Sheryl Sandberg talks about this all the time, but the work-life balance is just such a terrible term because it implies that work and life are at odds. And I think when we're our best selves, work and life aren't at odds.
Totally.
Work is a part of our lives, and it's a part of that cohesive whole.
Yeah. So you're at Qualtrics now. What do you love the most about what you're doing right now?
Ooh. Qualtrics is moving incredibly, incredibly fast. And what I love is we do this thing every few months where in our big company meetings, our CEO will say, who's in the biggest role of their lives? And pretty much every hand in the room goes up because the company is moving so fast. We are all learning so much and making a bunch of mistakes along the way. And when we look at each other and we say, holy cow, you and I, we are both in the biggest roles of our lives. Like, what are we learning? How are we pushing through that? That's a really just invigorating, exciting place to be when it's not completely exhausting. Yeah. And it can be exhausting and invigorating at the same time. So I think that's what I love about Qualtrics is that just collectively, it's just a group of smart, passionate, excited people who are in the biggest roles of their lives and are just excited about how much they're learning and growing.
That's so awesome. I was in another company where it was similar, and you sort of felt like you were living dog years.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
like, okay, we just accomplished like so much in just, a single year.
We'll talk about that. Like, we just did a big rollout of a new reporting platform that I'm helping to lead, and we look back and we're like, it feels like ancient history already. We finished it like 2 weeks ago. I mean, it's like so recent, but you're on to 6 more challenges just because everything is moving and growing so quickly, including us. Like, we as employees are moving and growing so quickly.
When you get the opportunity to do that, it's really great. So what advice, just kind of to wrap this all up, what advice would you give the women in STEM to do now to prepare for the role of their life?
Ooh, I think that training yourself to look for the areas, look for the opportunities where you're going to grow the most. So I've heard advice like take on the biggest challenges you can find. That doesn't work for me. That just sounds scary. But when I can reframe that to look for the areas where I can learn the most, that to me is a reframing that I can apply. Because looking at the places that are around me, that are adjacent to me, that I can grow into, and where I'm going to learn skills, I'm going to meet challenges that I've never met before, where I'm going to learn alongside everybody else who's in the biggest role of their lives, like that's exciting. And so training your eyes, instead of looking at scary challenges, but maybe even that very same thing, reframing it to a place where I can grow a lot, that suddenly makes it much safer to fail because I'm learning.
Yeah.
It causes me to look for the learning in failure, because if the only thing that matters is if I succeed or fail, then that's binary, right?
Yeah.
But even in the failures, if I'm looking for places to grow, that transforms every failure into a future success, really. And so I think that would be my advice, is to try to look and train yourself to look not for challenges, not even for hard problems necessarily, but look for the areas where you can learn the most and go chase those.
I love that. There's nothing else I can say about you. Said it perfectly. Thank you so much for giving us that advice and your wisdom, and for being on the show, and just love the passion that you exude, and that you started with a computer science degree, and you're still in it, and just loving it and loving what you can, the contributions and the impact you can make from it.
Well, thanks. It's a funny thing. I just had like a 5-year conversation with my boss. The greatest bosses will absolutely engage you in those conversations, and it was a funny thing because I was like, you're trying to dream about what you want, and I was like, I'm kind of living my dream job. And like, what an amazing thing to be able to say.
That's so great. Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate your time.
Thank you
for
much.
being on the show. Thanks for listening to the Women Tech Council Student Innovators Mentorship podcast series. Go to www.womentechcouncil.org for more info, and subscribe to our iTunes channel for access to our ongoing series.